Sunday.
It's Sunday morning.
I love mornings.
The games are over, and we're breaking it all down. This is your Morning After podcast, with all the insight and analysis on the Utes, Cougars, and Aggies. The Morning After podcast with Hans, Scotty, and Lloyd Cole begins right now.
And he gave us an opportunity to come in here and show what we're made of.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, welcome in. It's another edition of your Morning After podcast. Scott Gerard, Hans Olsen, Lloyd Cole. Let's recap it. We thought the state of Utah might go 3-0. Well, 1-2 isn't bad, I guess. Let's start with the 1. Hans, what a game. That's one people in Provo are going to be talking about for a long, long time. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. What'd you guys think of it? What'd you think of the whole deal?
I thought when magic happens on and off the field, good things happen.
Yeah, I thought, honestly, when you the old line from Gladiator, are you not entertained? I don't know how anybody could watch that game and not be entertained. That was as fun, as crazy, and bizarre of an ending as you could possibly hope for. And there's just some years where it's just a magical season, and guess what? BYU's having one of those right now.
It was incredible, man. It was incredible. The energy, the fans, that final drive, the game was incredible. The way Oklahoma State showed up, and it was crazy because they lost Ollie Gordon for periods of time. Their premier running back, they ended up losing their quarterback Garrett Rangel. I think he broke his collarbone. Took a pretty hard shot, went down on his shoulder and went out. So they had to bring Alan Bowman back, their seventh-year senior. And Alan Bowman comes in, and then they start running trick plays with Alan Bowman, and then Alan Bowman keeps hitting the quarterback keeper and coming off the edge and getting first downs. And it was wild. They threw a well-timed screen pass that got them down the field, and then with about, I don't know, it was, about a minute 10 left, they scored on a really nice pass, kind of a swing pass, which is just well-timed to Brennan Presley, number 80. He got to the outside, and they scored, and they took the lead. At that point, I can't remember, I think it was 35-31. And BYU was staring down 1 minute, 2 timeouts, and having to go the length of the field to try to find a win. And Jake Retzlaff was poised. He was under control, but he found himself in a 4th down situation on their side of the field, on BYU's side of the field. And I watched Jake Retzlaff manage a pocket so beautifully. For those of you that haven't seen it, Jake dives down in the pocket, which is a veteran move by a quarterback. He's sitting at probably a 3-4 yard depth, and he sees the edges kind of rushing shallow. So he jumps down in the pocket and drives his head down. What that does is that allows offensive linemen to reset and reposition. And as he dives down, all the offensive linemen reset. They lock up their guy, and then he pulls back out of the pocket, comes around, and he finds Chase Roberts on a late in that was about 1 yard past the first down marker on that 4th down and completes it. And at that point, you're like, okay, now you're 30 seconds or so, and you still have a bit of a chance, but not much. So they take the snap, and Jake Retzlaff goes off for about a 25-yard run. And he runs all the way down to the Oklahoma State 35. And you've got 19 seconds left. And you're thinking, okay, you're at the 35. Now, being at the 35 is different, guys, because when you're 35, you can run form routes. It's not so much of a Hail Mary and I'm just going to chuck it up and hope somebody catches it. You can run formed routes. And the very first play after the run, 19 seconds left, one timeout still on the board. He takes the snap and goes into a perfect pocket. That BYU offensive line was just awesome. Now, Oklahoma State, remember, guys, they were out there. Number one rusher, a guy that had racked up 23 and a half sacks. He was out. And their linebacker, who'd had 46 tackles, he was out. And they had lost their safety.
Yeah.
So that safety that we were talking about that had 64 tackles, he was number 3 in the country in tackles. That safety was announced as out before that game started. So Jake falls back into a beautiful pocket. Darius Lassiter was lined up in a slot. It was a twin set off to the left, and he was in the slot. They take off, and the play was meant to go to JoJo Phillips, who was playing the X just outside of Darius Lassiter. Well, Lassiter gets widened off a press. They're running a too-high safety. So Lassiter gets widened outside of JoJo Phillips. Phillips hits a deep in, and they were going to hit Phillips, get some yardage, and then take the timeout, and then I think take the shot at the end zone. Well, Phillips cuts in. Darius Lassiter realizes that he had gotten widened, and he's like, wait a second, there's open field here to my right. So because this was what he told us in the postseason, or in the postgame. And he said, and then I just broke in. And he said, when I broke in, there was open field. And when the ball was released, he said, I saw JoJo Phillips about 5 yards in front of me. He said, I thought the pass was to JoJo because it was supposed to be. And he said, but it went over JoJo's head. And I was like, I better go get this. So he said, I just went and got the ball. When I got the ball, I was like, geez, okay. Well, I break the tackle that was the initial defender on me. He goes, well, I'm just going to make this guy miss. And he gave a little bit of a juke to the safety that was over the top. He gave a juke. And he said at that point, there was the end zone.
Wow.
And that's how it goes, boys. And he finds the end zone and touchdown. There was 11 seconds left on the clock, and Oklahoma State gets it on their 25, and Jacob Robinson stays home on one of those last-ditch lateral efforts. You know, they're trying an old Music City Miracle lateral effort. Jacob Robinson stays home, makes the tackle, and BYU keeps themselves at 7-0. And it was one of the more incredible games I've ever watched, let alone called in a booth. It was just incredible.
That you and I talked a little bit yesterday. That fourth down play, I thought was, and by the way, I love that breakdown. I love on what happened on that final play. That's just incredible insight as to how that played out. But that fourth down play to me was the most impressive play on that drive. Not just what you mentioned, and with the offensive line breakdown and being able to reset and stepping up in the pocket and the awareness, but being able to throw that ball in a relatively tight window, too, and really good ball placement to make sure that it wasn't tipped or intercepted, because he did have to throw it behind him a little bit. But you can tell it was intentional and an incredible catch. And I just, of all the great plays on that drive, that fourth down drive isn't going to get talked about a lot. But to me, I think that was probably, in terms of level of difficulty, probably the most, best play on that drive, in my opinion. I mean, and I'm glad you broke that down, because I thought that was crazy impressive.
I'm telling you, Scotty, Lloyd, it's weird watching Jake Retzlaff right now.
Yeah.
And watching him manipulate a pocket, because there's stupid little details of a quarterback's pocket presence that helps offensive linemen and running backs and tight ends with all of their blocking schemes. And because when a quarterback is really loose and outside of the pocket, then an offensive lineman just loses their defensive lineman, because they're trying to keep their body in between the defender and the quarterback. Well, when the quarterback's not behind you and he's out and around, well, now I don't know which way to block my lineman. And it sucks, and you get frustrated with your quarterback. Retzlaff is doing such a better job of staying in the formation that the pocket is designed to help with. And I think it's helping that offensive line a lot. And there were a couple of different chip calls. So tight ends that were chipping and then going in a route. And what you had was you had 5 down linemen that were blocking 4 rushers through the primary, top peak points of that game. And they were blocking him, and Jake was trusting it, and he was throwing. And he was making plays. And so you start to wonder, well, what level of winner is Jake Retzlaff? Because where he came from, that Riverside College, and the numbers he put up at Riverside College, and the way he was, 44 touchdowns in a single year, 5,500 passing yards. It's like, okay, well, we know that the guy is a freak, and now it's starting to actually transition. And Aaron Roderick has raised a few NFL quarterbacks now. And it's like, is Aaron doing it again? Did he develop this guy again? And all of a sudden it's just clicking, and he's staying healthy, and the timing's right, and his weapons are right. And is he doing it again? Because now LJ Martin's healthy now, and he goes for 120 yards rushing. And Rapati's healthy. He went for, I think it was 80 or 90 yards rushing. And you're starting to see a team that's, you're scratching your head thinking, wait a second. Now, let's just talk about some of the negatives. This Oklahoma State team rushed for a net of 36 yards 2 weeks ago against West Virginia. Ollie Gordon couldn't get going. This team could not rush. Well, they went for 270 yards rushing against BYU.
First 100-yard rushing game for Ollie Gordon since the opener against South Dakota State. His totals since then were 49, 41, 42, 78, 50, and then got the century mark against BYU.
Maybe a little inflated on Ollie Gordon, though, because 50 of that 107 was on that one long run.
Yeah, but it's still,
for the most part, they held them in check. But they did rush. They rushed for 269 yards. So they did. They allowed them to rush on them.
Yeah, and it wasn't just him. This Rodney Fields, this freshman that jumped onto the field, was he was electric, and he was hitting some holes. And the thing that was discouraging was the game plan with Garrett Rangel was really hurting BYU. Before he went out, it was really stinging. And then Alan Bowman jumps on the field. Alan Bowman, guys, he was -4 rushing before he comes into this game, and he puts 20 rushing yards out there on 3 quarterback keeps where he pulls off the edge, and you're like, geez, okay. So the point I'm making is there were defenders out of position. I saw who they were. They're a couple of the usual suspects, and I think that is going to be heavily addressed. One of them is a linebacker, and I'm sure that it's going to be heavily addressed. The other issue I saw was the linebackers, instead of closing down to the line of scrimmage, you remember when we were talking about that last year, that there were a couple linebackers that were sitting at depth, and they weren't coming up. There was one linebacker in particular that wanted to sit at depth and didn't want to come up, and that hurt him just a little bit. But then I think he started to get it and started to come up and support. So make sure linebackers are coming downhill. And then, guys, they went to a 3-3-5. That's what they came out in. With traditional nose, they asked John Nelson at traditional nose to play 2 technique. So it wasn't a slant or tilt nose where, you're sparking a gap. Now, I do think that he did have pre-planned gap responsibility. I was trying to watch to make sure, because I've never known Jay Hill to run a 3-3-5 2-gap system. He'll run a 3-3 where he'll walk linebackers up, and then you'll still hit gap, but you don't have 2-gap. But I was watching that, and that was a little bit unique, and it wasn't really working. So I think they might go, and then they did transition back to times at the 4-2 or the 4-3, depending on if they were going nickel. And so that's my concern. I saw some leaks defensively that we had not seen to this point in the season from an Oklahoma State team that I had lost a lot of respect for in their offensive game.
Well, 7-0, man. Who would have thought? Who would have thought BYU would come out this season?
Was there ever any doubt when it was like, what was it, a minute 13, and they were getting the ball back? Was there ever any doubt? With what you saw with that Oklahoma State defense, did you have any doubt that they weren't going to be able to pull this off, Hans?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was more optimistic than I was doubtful, but in my mind I'm thinking, what are the odds at that point? Especially when you get yourself to fourth down. That's when I'd kind of lost all the hope, was you're at fourth down and you're on your side of the field. Now, I had been in it. I'd been in a game and been in drives like that. I've been a part of teams of drives like that. I mean, that drive was kind of reminiscent of Lavelle's last miracle against Utah at Rice Eccles Stadium. That was my senior year, and it was fourth down and 15?
Yeah.
I think it was 4th and 15.
Yeah.
And there was a desperation bomb to Jonathan Pittman, and it was like, holy cow, this is happening. Well, that took another spirited quarterback in Brandon Dolman that wasn't the world's greatest talent, but is one of the most solid-hearted, believing leaders that I've ever played football with. And he just made play after play, and we went down the length of the field and found the end zone and found the win. So when they got the fourth down, Lloyd, on their own, what was it, Scotty, maybe their own 35?
Yeah,
or
somewhere
so?
in there, yeah.
35. I at that point, I was thinking, this is going to take an absolute miracle. But I also wanted to point out, guys, there was a point where Oklahoma State was coming down to drive for the score and the lead. And there was about 1:28 left on the clock, and they were sitting somewhere around the 5 or 8 yard line of BYU. BYU had 3 timeouts, and I made this point on air. I said, okay, you're in between a rock and a hard place right now, because you want the clock to run out and not give them time to burn a clock down or not find the end zone. And I said, but you got 3 timeouts and you may need the clock. And right then Kalani calls a timeout to preserve the clock. I think if he hadn't done that, I think Oklahoma State slow plays it. They get it down to 30, 25 seconds. They've got 2 timeouts left at that point, and then they start taking their shots at the end zone. And I don't think BYU would have kept them out.
Yep.
The play calling was really nice. They had some really nice design, and Bowman was absolutely committed to getting in. So it was a great job of clock management. Scotty, I know that's your area, but I did see that early, and I did make that point, and I thought, man, great job preserving that clock and giving yourself that minute 19 or whatever it was when you did take possession.
Yep, I had that on my notes. I was going to bring that up on the show tomorrow, but yeah, I love smart coaching, and whether it was Kalani or somebody in his ear saying, "Hey, look, it ain't going our way right now. Let's save some time for the offense," and they needed every little bit of it, and I thought that was brilliant. There was an interesting, even in a loss, clock management that I really liked that Utah State did that we'll talk about coming up here a little bit later on. But I love it when guys get smart and make decisions based on realizing that things aren't going your way. And I talked about this for a couple weeks, Hans. I wanted to see a situation, not that I wanted to see BYU lay an egg defensively, but I wanted to see how they would respond when the defense wasn't dominant and the offense had to carry a game. And that's what we saw. I mean, you pointed out a lot of the issues that they had defensively. We knew a dud was coming. Like, you can't play at the college level with these young kids. You can't play at a dominant level for every consecutive game. It's just not going to happen. These kids are too distracted. They got too much going on. Now you throw the NIL stuff. You talk about all the time about all the distractions of collegiate athletes. Now imagine throwing NIL and sponsorship obligations that you have to put on top of all that you didn't have to deal with, and throw that on the mix. You're not going to have fully committed players every single week, and the defense laid an egg. I mean, that was a dud, and yet BYU still won when the defense wasn't its normal dominant self, and Jake Retzloff had to take over a game. That's what I wanted to see. That was my big question. What happens when you have to rely on the offense and not the defense? And guess what? They went down, they scored, and they won the game. And that was the last box I wanted to see checked for BYU. And boy, they checked it off in a big way.
It's crazy. And you just talked about BYU being at 7-0. And a couple of thoughts on this. Number one, that Baylor team that you beat on the road, they just went and beat that Texas Tech team that we were talking about. So Texas Tech is now, they're roughed up. SMU has not lost a game since BYU beat them 18-15. And their wins include TCU, Florida State, number 22 at the time, Louisville. And what just ended up happening with Louisville? Louisville got beat up pretty good against what was Miami, wasn't it? That they played.
Yeah, they lost by 7, I think.
But they beat a Louisville team, and then they beat Stanford. So they've got one loss on their schedule right now. They are 6-1, and that one loss is BYU. And you can also say that for Kansas State. Kansas State is 6-1 with that one loss being BYU, but they've beat Oklahoma State, Colorado, and West Virginia last night. Got to watch that game. Plus they beat Arizona, Tulane, and an FCS team to start the season. Those two teams are 12-0 outside of the one loss to BYU. So it's not a hollow 7-0. There are road wins in there against Baylor and Wyoming and SMU. There's good home wins against Kansas State and Arizona and now Oklahoma State. And it's an indicator, as Scotty just added on, that the offense had to carry the weight. It's an indicator that this team is all it's billed to be. And I expect them to climb the boards a little more than just one spot today, like they did last week. I think they're going to jump a little bit. But now things get intense. You guys watched Central Florida last night. Central Florida's no pushover. They've got some great run game, and they got a quarterback that's extremely athletic, and that's going to be a tough one in Orlando coming up next week. And then we got the rivalry game, boys.
Yeah.
So, and then they got to play Scattaboo coming up November 23rd. I think that they can beat Kansas. I think that they can beat Houston. So there's some tests here, but there is a road to 12-0.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to believe, but there's a road to 12-0.
Say that again one more time, Hans.
There's a road to 12-0 for BYU. Yeah, they're at 7-0. I mean, there's 5 games left, and they're all very winnable. Yeah. Very, very winnable. Every one of them has some real vulnerabilities, and right now BYU they're finding it. And the other thing, and I know you guys have seen teams like this, they just stay healthy. Nobody goes down. Nobody.
Yep. Well,
Darius Lassiter went down for a minute, and Lassiter came back on the field for that winning touchdown. But the guys just are running healthy. You miss Connor Pay, but Bruce Mitchell has shown up and has played that role great. Guys, Bruce Mitchell, the fill-in, the backup, the third-string center, who was a defensive lineman a year ago. He had another incredible game where he was just blowing his dude up off the line. And L.J. Martin, that's where L.J. Martin got the bulk of his carries, was between Bruce Mitchell and either Waylon Lapuaho or Austin Leosa. That's where he was getting the bulk of his yards, right there. Not on the outside. It was right through that center guard spot. So it's been impressive.
Well, let's go from the good and let's go to the bad. Lloyd, I got one question for you. What the hell, man?
Hey, let's start with the positive with Utah. And trust me, it'll be quick. The positive, the defense, they really did ball out against TCU. They showed up, and it was really a bend but don't break. I mean, only allowing 13 points to a TCU offense that was essentially scoring averaging around 35 on the season. They really did, I mean, early in the game, Utah had a pump blocked right around in the red zone, essentially, and they were able to hold them. Actually, and then they ended up blocking that field goal, so they didn't get a field goal till later. So they really did hold them, but it's the offense is still the big problem. I mean, as far as the defense, I will say they still didn't get a single sack. That's now in 3 games, and this is a negative on the defense. That's now they've only gotten 1 sack in the last 3 games, and that is not.
That's on 41 passing attempts.
Yeah, exactly, 41, and they didn't get a single pass, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. I mean, Morgan Scalley brought the house several times to try to get something going, and oftentimes they were able to get maybe an incompletion or something like that. The pressure did eventually start getting to Hoover a little bit, but the offense is this Utah team, and I'll just say the team itself, for the most part, it's and I tweeted this out. It's broken. The team is broken right now, especially offensively. And yeah, I get it. They got a freshman quarterback, but in the first half they had 9 drives, 9 punts. 9 times they punted. They punted the ball, and it was. I'll be honest with that. That first half watching was you kind of talk about struggling to watch bad football hands. It was, as far as watching on that offense, it was bad to watch. It was hard to watch.
It was, and when Mekhi Bernard went down, that worried me. He did end up coming back. What I saw was that he took a helmet to the kneecap. That's what I saw. They did kind of gator roll him, and I was worried that they twisted his leg up, but I think he took a helmet to the knee, and he did come back. But then I'm watching guys that I've got ultimate faith in, like Brent Keithy dropping a pass that hits him right in the hands. And I'm like, okay, you can't have a bad attitude again, not even for 5 seconds. You can't blame teammates. It's hard to be a leader when you drop a pass that is that open and that well put, and you drop it, because now you're a part of the problem. So you better figure yourself out before you start stomping around like everybody's losing this for me. And, this is something that I've always tried to teach my kids. Until you play a perfect game, you better keep your attitude right, and you better keep your mouth shut.
Yes.
And you better keep working in practice, and you better keep going, because you're a part of the problem too. I've taught my kids this. And when Keithy dropped that ball, and when Bernard went out of that game, and when Isaac Wilson aired a couple of balls that you're thinking, where was that? You got a group that is completely disjointed. And then I think that you got an offensive staff right now they don't know what direction to go. The play calling was all over the place, and they're trying to roll Isaac out and get him layered routes and something easy to drop off. And Isaac's trying to fire for the back receiver when he could have put it into a tight window on the drag that's probably an 8-yard depth. And you're like, what? What is going on?
Yeah, no, Christian talked about it. He said, like, this team is out of whack. Like, there's no any semblance of an identity. Like, I don't even know what direction. You can't really tell what direction what they want to actually be on offense. And as far as the red zone, I have no idea if they fixed the red zone offense because they never got into the red zone. They never. The only touchdown they came was a 71-yard bomb to Money Parks. They didn't have a single trip into the red zone to even kick a field goal or anything. So this team has there is a lot of problems, and I know we've made the comparison where essentially we've talked about how BYU right now is what Utah was expected to be. And Utah is really close to what BYU was possibly, maybe expected to be. And all of a sudden, we talked about a team that was looking at a Big 12 title run and a college and talking college football playoff. I don't know if they're going to get bowl eligible. And that you think about that for a sec, because they're getting ready to go to Houston, a Houston team that just got done beating TCU that just beat you. And then they have BYU. You got Colorado, who's sitting there, who just dump trucked Arizona. You've got Iowa State, and then you got UCF. Show me 2 wins in there right now that you could be like, that's a guaranteed 2 wins.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it doesn't. There's nothing guaranteed in there.
Can I start the get Heward reps bandwagon going right now?
You can start to get somebody some reps.
Like I want to see some experience at quarterback. I don't want to see Rose. I want to see Heward. Heward's played, and I know it's FCS level, but this guy's played college football. I want to see this guy get some opportunities. This team deserves, and maybe they're past that point, Lloyd. You bring up a good point. There's no college football playoff now. There's certainly, there's no Big 12 championship game to be played for. So maybe you do just say, okay, well, Isaac's our future, so let's just roll with him and just start preparing for next year. And that bums me out, too, because this team deserves more than that. This defense deserves more than that. But at this point, maybe you just do bite the bullet and just say, you know what, let's start getting this kid reps and prepare for next year. Or if you want to go down fighting, I think you give Heward a shot and say, what can you do for me? Because what we saw yesterday was just a complete debacle.
Well, I think what you might start seeing, and we've started to see this now with NIL, and people like you might start seeing players start to, whether it's sit out and get ready for the NFL or looking to transfer or whatever. You might, because what is Utah playing for now? Outside of trying to get to a bowl game, but that's changed for what college football is now. So I don't know. I know what you're saying as far as going as seeing something with Sam Heward and maybe see what you have, but at the same time, do you? I almost feel like you need to you need to stick with Isaac Wilson and play it out and continue to and try to develop your future, because I think you've made the decision that he is your future. So, and if that's the case, then I think that's what you have to do. I don't know. Maybe
even
I'm
if
wrong.
you've made your decision that he's your future, in order to get to your future, you got to win.
Right.
And, if there's a quarterback in that quarterback room that gives you a better shot, which maybe there isn't, Rose continues to get beat out and Sam Heward got beat out. Maybe they're just not as good, but I'm with Scotty. I at least test the possibilities, because this team was too good to have them potentially miss a bowl game. That would be, I would say, as incredible as BYU has been, that would be the polar opposite of incredibility.
Yep.
If Utah missed a bowl game with the team that they had put together. And I know you do get a couple of your dogs back. I know that Keanu Tanavasa was back out there and Crinny Reed was back out there, but then you're out without Junior Tafuna. And
yep, Tafuna and O'Toole was out.
You still don't have Connor O'Toole. And so you don't have your staples and your reliability. Van Fillinger mustered up 1 tackle. And as you mentioned, not a single sack across the board, 3 games running without a sack for the University of Utah. Everything feels just disjointed. And they're going to have to get through this Houston game to try to get to a bye week so they can lick their wounds again. And I'll tell you this, boys. They better get that win against Houston before that bye week.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't, then they go into that bye week with 4 consecutive losses, a bye week, getting ready for BYU. That would be a downer of 2 weeks for that team, trying to prepare for their rival that's coming into their house. And I still look at this thing and I'm like, man, this lines up. It lines up for a wild night of football. I wanted them to beat TCU in Houston so that we had Big 12 implications going into that game. I do think Utah has officially eliminated themselves from the Big 12 championship game race, which was a bummer. But Utah's still going to be very committed to getting that win against their rival. So get ready. Go get that win against Houston. Don't mess things up at Houston. And I'm more leaning towards Scotty's side. Find the quarterback that can win me a game. And it's not that it was all Isaac Wilson's fault. And you're right, Isaac is absolutely going to be the future. But I need a quarterback that can win me a game right now. And it just feels like that might not be the case. I do think that you tell me how you felt like Mekhi Bernard finished. He's going to be ready for Houston, right?
Yeah, I think he will be. I mean, that was Kyle did say that was, and he didn't say it was disappointing. It was surprising that they weren't able to. I mean, that's been the one thing they've been able to do. And that was a weakness of TCU, but the TCU loaded the box because they knew Isaac Wilson. They brought up the safeties. They knew Isaac Wilson couldn't beat them, and so there wasn't a lot of room for Mekhi Bernard. But yeah, I don't think that I think he'll be ready for Houston.
How about this from Kyle afterwards? Said, we know exactly what our problem is, and it's our job as coaches to fix it. The players are playing hard. I'm not throwing any player under the bus. Everything is up in the air, and we will evaluate in terms of coaching staff. And we've got to look at everything and make some tough decisions. And this is in reference to coaching, not necessarily personnel. And Andy Ludwig's been really good for a while for Utah, but this offense is stuck in mud. And granted, I know the Cam Rising situation has thrown everybody for a loop, but Kyle is not pleased. He's not happy, and I don't know exactly what that means. I don't know if we're going to see a change in play calling duties or if he is referencing the quarterback situation, but it seems like with those pointed comments, it's more about the coaching than it is the players. And so I'm very curious to know what this means for BYU and if we're going to see any announcements coming up this week. Because Hans, when you look at BYU's coaching staff, let's say, heaven forbid, Aaron Roderick needs to take a couple weeks off. Okay, well, you got Fesi Sataki. You've got other guys on that staff that have called offensive plays. There's dudes that are right there ready to go. When you look at Utah, who's next man up in terms of offensive capabilities of being an OC or calling plays?
Ooh, probably Jim Harding.
That's the only person I would think of, yeah.
Jim Harding be your next, and then Freddie Whittingham probably, then Quinton Ganther. But you're right, the one that probably has the most understanding of what this team's capable of is going to be Jim Harding. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what he means, but it is really interesting to see Kyle with some very pointed comments. You can tell that Kyle's salty, and for good reason.
This is a gut-wrenching season for Kyle.
Yeah.
And it's a gut-wrenching season for Utah fans. I did think – I actually wrote a tweet and then deleted it. I did think that Utah was going to find a way out of that game. I did. I thought that they would – I'd had it written at half because I kind of get tired of the everybody piles on a team.
Yeah.
Everybody gets down on a team, and there's a couple of incompletions. I still thought at half, I'm like, they're not going to get beat by this TCU team. It's not a good TCU team. They've got a great quarterback that can put up yardage, but it's not a complete team. And like we went through the numbers, Scotty. You remember the eight top 25 categories, 8 bottom 100 categories. They just had too many gaps. And then TCU decides they're going to show up at Rice Eccles Stadium. That's a second game on an 8:15 night kick where a team comes in there and beats you. That's a bad look for those Utah fans. That's brutal for them. And I feel bad for them because this was the team.
And we talked about you're talking about Kyle Whittingham and where they're at as a staff. And we thought, hey, is this his is this his swan song? Go out on top. Get your Big 12 championship, get to the college football playoff, and hey, ride out into the sunset. The way this season's going, I can't imagine Kyle Whittingham wants this to be his very last season.
No,
a season that's like this.
Yeah. All right, wrapping things up. Called the Utah State game last night. They've now lost 6 in a row. They had a 17-point lead. They were up 17-0 against New Mexico. Had all the momentum, forced a 3-and-out, and guy muffed the punt. And New Mexico turns that into a touchdown. They cut the lead to 2, 17-15. Utah State pushes it back out to 16 and held a 9-point lead in the fourth quarter. Late in the fourth quarter, they give up a touchdown and then go for it on fourth, and it was a long one. It was about nearly 2 yards at about their own 31-yard line. They run the quarterback sneak. It gets stacked up. New Mexico turns that into a touchdown. There's still a little bit of time left for Utah State to go down and try to win the game. But Spencer Petras throws his only interception of the game. He was really good until that last throw. And New Mexico comes in and pulls off the come-from-behind victory, 50-45 against Utah State. The last 4-point totals Utah State's given up: 45 to Temple, 62 to Boise, 50 to UNLV, and 50 to New Mexico. Bronco Mendenhall comes in, was super emotional after the game, but the hits just keep coming for Utah State as they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory last night. It was there to be had. In fact, I think had they not muffed that punt up 17-0, I think they probably win in a blowout fashion. Hans, you talk about all the time, 1 or 2 plays can dramatically alter a game, and that let New Mexico get a little bit of pride, a little bit of confidence going, and at that point, New Mexico was off and running, especially on the offensive side. Utah State look, offensively, their last, we talk about those last 4 games. Offensively, they scored 29, 30, 34, 45. You would think with those point totals, you'd be winning most of those games, but they're still losing. You put 45 on the board yesterday, and you still lose. You put 34 against UNLV, you still lose. You put 30 against Boise State, you still lose. 29 against Temple, you still lose. And offense, not the issue. Defense, Utah State's got a lot of struggles right now.
Bronco gets some sopapillas in them at the half because they put up 35 points in the second half.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few guys that I feel just sick for.
Yep.
I feel sick for Spencer Petras. He played a game that should have won.
Yeah.
I feel sick for Rashul Faison. He plays games like he should win. I also liked Herschel Turner. That was a bright spot. Watching Herschel Turner take the field in that 43-yard touchdown run that he went on, that was awesome. Right up the middle, just busted the gut and gone. I feel sick for Jalen Royals and Brock Lane. Both those guys fought so hard in that game. I feel sick for guys like Teague Anderson and Bowman and some of the other guys up front. I feel sick for them because I do. I feel like they're doing enough that they should be winning these games. But for some reason, you're falling so short. And, Scotty, we talk about some of the guys that stayed, some of the guys that left. It felt like the offense stayed together pretty well. It was mostly the defense that lost personnel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Some defenders that decided they outside of Ike Larson, it just felt like the defense decided they were going to jump ship.
Yeah, and I actually thought that the players they replaced them with would be an upgrade, and I think I think they were, but now they're all banged up. Let me pull my spotting boards up here because you look at the list of guys that are now out for the season, and either it's injury or whether they're going to go transfer. But you look at Blaine Spires, starting defensive end, he's out. Inoko McGow, another D-end that was slided to start, he's out for the year. Taz Williams, out for the year. Simeon Harris, out for the year. Clyde Washington, your starting Mike linebacker, is now out for the year. You look across the board of the defense that was already turned over in a big, big way, and then you just lost a ton of starters to injuries. And so you add on a new defensive scheme, all the issues that Utah State had in the offseason, and then all these injuries. You understand why they're giving up nearly 45 points a game. And if you take their first game out of the year against the FCS opponent, that number is going to move up to almost nearly 50 points a game they're giving up. In fact, the only team in the FCS ranks that they've played that they held under 40 points this year was Utah, and Utah scored 38.
Oh, man. They gave Utah a game.
Yeah.
Up there at Maverick Stadium. They gave them a game. Well, I'm sick for this staff, and, I'm sure that they're seeing the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
And but the crazy thing is you have to show up this morning with your staff. You have to watch film, and you have to look at each other and say, well, we got Wyoming. We're all headed to Laramie. How are we going to do this? What are we going to change defensively? And you're looking at all the defensive coaches like, I need some ideas from you. I need some ideas. And these guys have to still care because they've got futures in this game.
Yeah.
And they don't know where they're going to be or how that future is going to look or what it's going to end up happening. And could you imagine showing up, guys, and just kind of knowing? Lloyd, that would like throw us back to when you and I were put in that
trust.
That trust, and we knew that the station was being sold. And we went to a Christmas party, and they put our table all the way in the back and away from everybody else. And it was me and Lloyd and Jake Scott, and we're sitting there like, what? And then they brought a comedian in that was joking and said, how about the table of losers in the back? And you're like, shoot, man. But we still had to do a daily show, and it sucked. That was a rough time in my life. And you know what you do? You just show up. You don't have any options. You show up. Now, do you show up with the same zest, the same gusto that you were showing up when you open up with a win against Robert Morris and you gave Utah a fight and you're like, okay, we're going to go get Temple and we're going to turn this thing around, and Temple beat you and you're like, damn. And then things start to spiral, and I just feel sick for them. And I hope that they're able to show up and find a win against Wyoming. It'd be nice if they could finish with a win against Hawaii, one against Wyoming, get that Colorado State win, at least show up and get a few wins.
Yeah. Yep, get to go to Laramie, Hans. Very fired up for that. Excited to go back to Laramie. You were just there a few weeks ago.
Place of wonder and enchantment.
Yes, yep.
It's beautiful.
Well, that wraps it up for us, gentlemen. Hope you have a great Sunday. I got the Bar W New York strips ready to go, Hans. I'm gonna fire up my grill and put some sear marks on those bad boys, and we're gonna be off and running. How's the brisket looking?
I was talking to you yesterday. I got into a crazy stall at 160 on that brisket that lasted like 2 hours. I could not get it off the 160, and it was driving me nuts. I went till about 11:30. I took a couple of NyQuil try to get myself to sleep because I've had like 2 or 3 hours of sleep for the last 3 nights, and I just needed sleep. So I popped a couple of NyQuil, and I gave up on it about 11:45. I took it off at 192 or 193, but it's going to sit until 4 o'clock today. So I should be okay with that, right, Scotty?
That'll tender it up. You'll be fine. And honestly, it's not necessarily about temperature. It's about fill. And if you get that probe just sliding through there like it's butter.
It did.
Then that's all that matters.
And I did do that. I pushed that through, and I thought, oh, okay, well, there's quite a bit of give there. So I think I'm just hoping it's going to be okay because it's my mom's birthday today. Brother's coming down from Logan, and we've just kind of got a little bit of a family party, but I'm hoping that thing goes okay.
Happy birthday, Fawn. Nice. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, my mama's birthday, so we're gonna celebrate that and have a party. But no, I don't. Do we got any stories to tell? Any big stories that we got?
I'm trying to think. Story time. I don't really.
You've got to have something. That'd have been a crazy night on Friday night. I bet those Swachos extra good. Yeah.
Swachos were incredible. I will tell you, I'll take you story time in the booth when that call goes down. And I don't know if you guys have listened to the replay.
Oh yeah.
And we have found that the screaming, the voice was Ralph Sobleski, who I've gotten to know really well, and man, he's a great guy. I guess he is the yeller. And I don't hear him yelling in that call. So, but you can tell that there's about 12 people in that booth when Darius Lassiter catches that thing, and the booth was going crazy. But it's the first time standing up in that media booth, guys, that I could actually feel movement in the booth.
Yeah,
I could feel movement, and you know how solid that booth is.
Oh, yeah.
And I could feel movement in the booth, and I thought, wow, this place is going nuts. It's the most wild I've seen that place. Oh, the other thing I'll tell you, they ran a drone show through a lot of the game that was crazy, both the south and north end zones, and they were throwing up all the different designs of the Utah logos over the years and rotating it. And what it made me think, guys, like these college programs are now going to, like, we got to be a show in order to sell tickets.
Yeah.
We got to, like, we can't just think it's about the football. It's no longer about the football, man. It's about Cosmo. It's about the Flames. It's about drone shows. It's about fireworks. Like, this is a $300 or $400 ticket where you're coming to the Stadium of Fire that has a football game at it now. They are going to the greatest lengths to make this a show, to get people out of their houses, to buy the ticket, and to bring their kids. But that's what we are resorting to. Texas is doing the same. You guys saw the Texas videos that were surfacing with their drone shows and fireworks shows, and they're like, even Texas, in order to keep 90,000 people in that stadium, is having to go to great lengths to get people off their couches because it's just so nice to sit on your couch and watch a game.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to, we've talked about this all the time, and that's why, Ryan Smith is not just redoing the arena, but also redoing downtown. And the game ops experience is so good because they realize that they're not competing with other professional teams. They're competing with Costco that can sell you a really great TV for $600, a sound bar for $80, a couch for $200, and a lot of Coke Zero for next to nothing. And you can sit in the comfort of your own home and not worry about traffic and not worry about parking and not worry about any of that and just have a great game experience. And the TV production's through the roof now. So that's who they're competing with. So they're like, okay, so we've got to make this more than just about the 60 minutes of football. We got to make this about the experience. and BYU's knocking it out of the park. I saw some beat writer from that was there last night that said essentially this is the best game ops experience that I've seen in the Big 12. And that's high praise for BYU, who spares no expense when it comes to that. And it's a smart and wise thing to do.
BYU is knocking it out of the park. And the show that the Cosmo puts on, I know that the previous game, I think Urban Meyer said if he was running a team, he would try to get that guy, he would have that guy do a tryout for his athleticism. Whoever Cosmo is, like, it's they put on a show.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, enjoy your Sunday.
That place was crazy. It was crazy.
Hans Telfon, happy birthday from the Gerard family. We're fired up for her.
And
That's
from the
awesome.
Cole family, happy birthday. That's awesome.
We'll do it, fellas. I will see you all tomorrow. We got a big week of shows coming up. Oh, did the Utah Hockey Club, how about an overtime win last night, too?
There you go.
Good job by the Hockey Club.
I love it, man.
Another overtime win, guys. Against the Bruins.
Against the Boston freaking Bruins. How cool is this? I love it. Yeah. I love it. Hans and Scotty, Lloyd Cole, that's your Morning After podcast. We're back at it tomorrow at high noon right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This has been your Morning After podcast with Hans, Scotty, and Lloyd Cole. Catch more of the Hans and Scotty Show weekdays from noon to 3 and in podcast form by searching Hans and Scotty on your podcasting platform of choice. This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.